Chapter 481. Flame 2. The billowing mane of a lion made of gray flames incited a ferocious and immense rage within Eugene. Everything, including the words the specter had been spouting, felt like mockery and deceit to Eugene. Moments before, the specter had been adapting Hamel's techniques in its own way. But after being crushed and defeated, he resorted to using the white flame formula? "What the fuck do you think you are doing?" Eugene's words, fueled by his rising fury, were cut short. Before the flames began to flicker, he sensed a change in the specter's demeanor. Naturally, the specter had not resorted to the white flame formula out of mockery or deceit. Instead, he had deemed the technique the most effective means of unleashing his full power. In an instant, 10 stars formed in its chest. Through the opened gates, the dark power of destruction poured out and was harnessed in the manner of the white flame formula. The specter's flames were ignited furiously. Eugene was at a loss for words at the sight. It wasn't merely an imitation. The specter had used its dark power like mana to perfectly replicate the white flame formula. How? The question slipped from Eugene's lips involuntarily. The 10 stars within the specter's chest were palpable even to Eugene. This could represent only one thing. The specter had reached the 10th star in the white flame formula. In the history of the Lionheart clan, no one but Vermouth had reached 10 stars. In the first place, the sheer fact that the specter could even wield the white flame formula was incomprehensible. Using Hamel's techniques? That was expected. If the specter had employed the red flame formula instead, the variant of the white flame formula, Eugene could have accepted that as well. It was entirely possible that the specter might have picked it up from Hector Lionheart after he was reborn as a monster. But what the specter wielded was not the red flame formula but the white flame formula of the main family. Moreover, it was a version more complete than any practiced by the members of the main family. Who was it? Eugene gritted his teeth as he spoke. Who taught you that? I don't know if they taught it to me exactly, the specter murmured softly. He raised his demonic sword towards Eugene. There were no more words spoken as the specter had nothing further to say regarding Eugene's question. Eugene understood the significance of the specter's action. They were on a battlefield where the hero and the demon king stood facing each other. Their swords were drawn, pointing at each other. In the distance, far behind them, the hero's forces clashed against the demon king's monsters. There was only one course of action to follow, just as it had been 300 years ago. It had been the same even in the lost age of myth. Eugene had momentarily been distracted by his intense curiosity, but now he recalled the reality of their current situation. Right? He told himself as he calmed down. The emotion he should be feeling wasn't curiosity. The question of why or how the specter knew the white flame formula could wait until right before he killed the creature. The two flames flickered. One was the blackened flame of what was once the white flame formula but was now uniquely Eugene's, and the other was a gray flame forged from the dark power of destruction. Engulfed in their respective fires, the two figures soared high into the sky while shaking the very space around them. Eugene made the first move. His dark wings of prominence left no trace in their wake. The repeated leaps made tracking by sight impossible, and it even fooled the perception of others. Yet the specter responded. The 10th star white flame formula granted the specter a sense of omnipotence it had never known before. It was as if each lick of flame that wrapped around his form was imbued with its own sentience. The specter reacted instantly. With a clash, he intercepted the holy sword as it aimed for him from an angle. The burst of light at the moment of impact threatened to incinerate both his dark power and the specter's eyes, but the vehemently opposing flames of dark power pushed back even the light of the holy sword. But the holy sword wasn't his only threat. The moonlight sword was swooping in from the opposite direction, and the specter's flames intensified in response. Was it forming a sword? No. What emerged from the swelling flames was an alien spell, yet it was also familiar. Vermouth's, Eugene realized. The flames moved as if they possessed their own will. They took the form of talons and caught the moonlight sword. A mere mass of dark power or magic wasn't sufficient to block the moonlight sword. But this dark power was formed from the white flame formula, and the spell was the alien magic that Vermouth used in the past. It wasn't perfect and couldn't completely block Eugene's attack, but it managed to neutralize the strike to a significant degree. The specter retreated without faltering. Information was permeating his mind, but it didn't belong to him or Hamel. There was a door through which dark power flowed to him. Someone beyond that door was slipping him not only dark power but also information. "It's you," the Spectre accused. Vermouth hadn't killed the Spectre. While the Spectre didn't know Vermouth's true intent, Vermouth tolerated his existence and even empowered him despite the intense animosity he had towards the Spectre. When Vermouth first encountered the Spectre, he was sitting atop the remnants scarred by the divine sword. He had displayed fierce hostility, but in the end it turned into sympathy. "Is this my choice?" the Spectre asked himself. He had lived for years under the delusion of being Hamel after being born with memories manipulated by Amelia Merwin. He then took shelter in Revesta and mingled with the dark power of destruction. It wouldn't have been strange for him to die, or rather it was expected for him to die. But he did not die. Vermouth didn't wish for the Spectre's death. As a result, the Spectre became the incarnation of destruction. He had heard the truths known to the Demon King of Incarceration. "I made the decision," the Spectre muttered softly. He broke free from Amelia Merwin's shackles. He learned he was not Hamel but an impostor. It was Vermouth who helped him shed those shackles and granted him power. But Vermouth, the tragic hero, didn't force anything on the Spectre. He didn't answer any of the Spectre's questions either. The Demon King of Incarceration was the same. What he wanted was for the Spectre to make a decision, to take action. So, even if someone else intended for it to be this way, the Spectre believed his decision was the right one. Then was this decision like one Hamel would make? The Spectre lifted his gaze. After being pushed back a bit, Eugene was charging again. He could see the holy sword and the moonlight sword crossed in Eugene's hands. No longer did the golden eyes show a will to kill. Rather, he was completely focused on victory, which transcended even his will to kill. Eugene's eyes were devoid of emotion, and it prevented his judgment from being clouded by trivial feelings. And just as he was like both Hamel and Eugene at the same time. "This is who I am," the Spectre thought. He had no intention of losing. He desperately desired victory. Just as Eugene had addressed him, the Spectre sought a victory befitting a demon king. As the sword strike loomed, the Spectre clenched his fist. A spell manifested without any sign. Space inverted and swapped the positions of the Spectre and Eugene. However, Eugene did not panic when he suddenly found himself standing elsewhere. Instead, he continued to swing his sword. Surging strikes extended towards the Spectre's position, where space itself then ruptured open. An impossible distance emerged between them, an empty void. Eugene's strikes filled and erased the void, yet they did not reach the Spectre. The torn distance between the two vanished as the space merged again. Eugene and the Spectre came to stand face to face without any acceleration. However, Eugene thrust the moonlight sword forward as if he had anticipated the sudden change. The encroaching moonlight caused the Spectre's flames to undulate. Layers upon layers were stacked in the space. But before the moonlight could explode, it was sealed off by gray veils. The Spectre's sword descended from above it. Crack! The moonlight sword impaled the ground in vain. The earth meant to be buried alongside it had also vanished, but an immense weight clung to the moonlight sword and refused to let go. "It's heavy," Eugene thought. The crushing and layering of space was magic that Eugene recognized. It belonged to Vermouth Lionheart. His epithets included God of War and Master of All. Not only was he the strongest warrior, but he was also the supreme wizard. Eugene had often teased Sienna whenever the topic of Vermouth's magic was brought up. She would always retort in fury that their specialties were different. But even Sienna acknowledged Vermouth's magical prowess. While Sienna mastered what could be called conventional magic, Vermouth specialized in spatial magic. The tomb of the Black Lion Castle, the ley line, the dark room of the Lionheart Mansion, and even the other side of Lehanjar. All were created by Vermouth's spatial magic. Veins started to bulge in the hand gripping the moonlight sword. Despite being crushed by dozens or even hundreds of overlapping spaces, the moonlight sword still emitted light. Moonlight and flames intertwined and overlapped to complete the empty sword. The oppressive forces were cleaved in one stroke. The intuition granted by Eugene's divinity caused him to move. The imperceptible and the unpredictable guided Eugene's movements. Both the holy sword and the moonlight sword were enveloped by the empty sword. The force concentrated on Eugene's weapons far exceeded the Spectre's expectations. The magic the Spectre used in an attempt to hold Eugene was annihilated before it could even form. He knew he couldn't remain in Eugene's close proximity. He knew he would be consumed by the flames, so the specter vanished without even leaving an afterimage. But Eugene didn't lose track of him. He followed the specter's movements without missing a beat. Gray and black. Two beams of light streaked across the sky, and the very heavens seemed to shake as if it might collapse. The flight of the two colors lasted only a moment, but for the two in question, it didn't feel brief. Both knew that the slightest delay, miss, or a lapse in judgment could lead to their immediate defeat. The tension and the process were too much for the brain to bear. Eugene could smell blood inside his nose. This was precisely where humans were overwhelmingly disadvantaged against demons. Humans were burdened with the fragility and fatigue of the body. Of course, the current Eugene was unbelievably robust compared to any other human, but he was largely helpless against the massive mental fatigue that was building up. Had he been fighting alone, he would have collapsed with the accumulating fatigue and injuries. But that wasn't the case. The sky was bright and filled with light. The saints and priests were praying solely for Eugene. The smell of blood vanished from his nose, and the throbbing pain in his head disappeared. His organs, torn and shredded from the remnants of the shock, healed in an instant. Both swords were enveloped by the empty sword, and he crossed them. It resulted in a collision of two manifestations of the empty sword, each with 5 layers. It was impossible even for Eugene to form any more layers, so instead he merged the two empty swords. The power was too great for a mere human mind to handle. Akasha started to glow in response to the heavy burden from inside Eugene's cloak. Mare held the staff tightly, contributing auxiliary computation to Akasha's power. Even Prominence, acting as Eugene's pseudo-core, drew out strength in its frenzy. Eugene raised the swords above his head, causing Prominence to soar with the swords in tandem. The single wing, one, of black flames became one with the holy sword and the moonlight sword. Eugene knew he couldn't contain this power for long. There was no leeway in his control over it. If he was careless, he would instantly be crushed by the enormous power. The specter twisted its body mid-air while fleeing. He looked down at the royal palace and the now empty city below. The Liberation Army was advancing from behind Eugene's back. But did it really matter? If such immense power were to strike down, it wouldn't simply obliterate Horia, but Nahama in its entirety would be wiped off the map. No, that's not it. The specter realized his error in judgment. He was not he to entertain such a thought. The specter intuitively knew what the sword would cause. Although it took the form of a sword, what Eugene held would not cut but devour everything in its path. If it wasn't countered and neutralized, it would immediately consume and completely annihilate him. The power contained in the attack wouldn't target anything else. Destroy the entirety of Nahama? Such a thing would never happen. Even though Eugene held enough power to obliterate this vast nation, it was concentrated solely on the specter. It was an absurdly precise attack, or rather, it was already beyond the mortal realm. It felt more like a miracle or a divine act. Was this made possible by the divinity of the god of war, or was it because of the favor of the god of light? It's everything, the specter realized. It would have been impossible for Eugene to wield such power without all these reasons. Even Mare and Akasha were exerting their full efforts to allow Eugene to control this power. Eugene clenched his teeth and brought down the sword. This was by no means the divine sword. Yet it was imbued with power comparable to one. The specter immediately flew towards the sword. This sword had reached the realm of miracles. Miracles were powers beyond rational comprehension. It was different from a manifestation of divine energy. A miracle was the cumulation of human efforts. It was impossible to escape from a miracle that wouldn't miss its mark. As such, the specter needed to negate the aspect of fatality from the unavoidable miracle. 10 stars of the dark power-driven white flame formula started to spin rapidly and poured out dark power. It wasn't just an infinite amount of dark power, but rather an infinite amount of dark power refined and ignited into flames with precision. It's not enough. The specter had said this to Hamel, to Eugene, and now to himself. This was far from sufficient. If he wanted to become a true challenge to Eugene, he needed to be much stronger. He needed to become an entity that absolutely could not be surpassed. The star of destruction shone. At that moment, the specter truly matched his title of the incarnation of destruction. Dark power flowed from the 10 stars and formed into a sword. This sword wasn't formed from the same singular color of ominous gray as before. Instead, it was a blend of all colors. An indescribable mass of color stretched out like a sword. Eugene recalled the demon king of destruction he had seen long ago. It had been an existence that seemed to drive one mad just by looking at it, an existence that seemed to blend every color existing in this world. Hamel had seen it, Ogoroth had seen it. This is different, Eugene noticed. He felt the presence of the demon king of destruction from the specter. Both Ogoroth and Hamel felt fear when they saw the demon king of destruction. He had been filled with the desire to flee. Ogoroth didn't run from fear because he had many believers to protect. He had been driven by the intuition that if he fled, the demon king of destruction would engulf the entire world. So Ogoroth didn't flee. Instead, he commanded his divine soldiers to death and led the charge. Hamel couldn't overcome the fear and the desire to flee. As such, he fled with Vermouth and everyone else. That had been the right choice. At that moment, no one could stop the demon king of destruction, and there had been no need to. But even if he had made the right choice, Hamel had been tormented by a sense of humiliation. Since then, the demon king of destruction had become a trauma for Hamel and his companions. Then what about now? Was he filled with a desire to flee? No. Such thoughts didn't cross Eugene Lionheart's mind. He wasn't filled with a sense of duty like Ogoroth, nor was he overcome with the fear that Hamel was. What Eugene Lionheart felt now was rage and the intent to kill. Eugene's sword clashed with the sword of destruction. There was no sound upon the collision. Instead, light flickered dozens of times in the skies above Horia as if day and night were interchanging in an instant. Even at that moment, neither Eugene nor the specter stopped moving. The Holy Sword and the Moonlight Sword lost their light, likely because of expending too much power all at once. Without any hesitation, Eugene tossed the swords back into his cloak. He could see the figure of the specter a short distance away in the sky. Or could he even call this place the sky? He cast aside such trivial concerns. The sword of destruction it had wielded had also vanished in the clash. However, the destruction it had drawn forth was mixed into the white flame formula. The gray flames had now turned into a chaotic blaze of mixed colors. "You bastard!" As always, Eugene let out a curse unbecoming of the hero. "Come here, you." Still, contrary to his words, it was Eugene who charged toward the specter first. Chapter 482, Flame 3. Amelia Merwin was subdued during the battle on the main streets, and the liches were annihilated. In other words, there was no longer a need to be wary of the proliferation of the undead. In addition, the undead that were still alive were noticeably weakened. They were still mobile due to the remaining dark power inside of them, but they were no longer strengthened or could execute higher orders. The undead were reduced to mere meat shields and posed no significant threat to the Liberation Army. The real issue was the demons of Revesta. Most of them were high-ranking demons and they were powerful. However, the Liberation Army had plenty of powerhouses, including the leaders of the knightly orders, the archwizards, the warriors, and the mercenary leaders, to match the high-ranking demons. Melkith was particularly eye-catching among them as she rampaged in her Omega Force. She attracted the attention of the enemies with her enormous size. Moreover, her strength was incomparable, and with just a few swings of her arm, she could sweep away legions of the undead. As a result, she forced a considerable number of high-ranking demons to engage her. Omega Fire Storm. The enemies kept coming without rest, but Melkith did not tire at all. On the contrary, she was energized and overflowing with power in her current state. She craved more formidable foes and more intense battles. Wind, flame, lightning, earth. The power of the four spirit kings was concentrated in Melkith. Additionally, all the spirit wizards of the White Tower of Magic were supporting her from behind to enhance the power of the spirits. Thus, it was called Omega Force, which surpassed Union Force. She was empowered not only by the power of the four spirit kings but also by that of various other spirits, making each of Melkith's movements akin to natural disasters. Harperon, the 57th ranked demon who boasted his strength, was left in a near-death state by a single strike from Melkith in her Infinity Force form. Although most of the demons challenging Melkith right now were stronger than Harperon, the gap between Infinite Force and Omega Force was also greater than the gap between the demons themselves. "You're weak. Too weak," Melkith proclaimed, launching haughty kicks and punches. "The North. Only the Northern Conquest can make my heart race." Her movements lacked finesse and could even be called amateurish, but their power was terrifyingly destructive. Even the most powerful demons suffered fatal wounds if merely grazed. Therefore, the demons had no choice but to desperately avoid Melkith's attacks. "The storm calls me," Melkith bellowed. All her shouts were for Tempest, who finally gave in today. Melkith was aware of Tempest's desire for the north, even if she didn't know the specifics. If Tempest wished for a conquest of the north, Melkith was more than willing to join. "People look like ants from up here," she shouted. Such was the enormity of Melkith at that moment. "Right. If it's now, yes, in my current state I might be stronger than even the wise Sienna." Melkith quickly ceased her dangerous contemplation. In the not-too-distant sky, she could see the figure of Sienna floating in her own galaxy. Now that she had obtained Omega Force, Melkith could gauge Sienna's power more accurately than before. "That's my sis," Melkith nodded in a quick change of attitude. Currently, Sienna was interfering on every battlefield. She was distinctly supporting each individual with her power. The stars flowing from Sienna's galaxy transformed into magic suitable for each warrior's situation to guide the flow of the battle. Who among the world's wizards could accomplish such a feat? It was a straightforward task for an archwizard to bombard a battlefield and seize victory. However, it was impossible to attend to everyone on this chaotic battlefield and match magical support with their needs. "I should seriously consider learning martial arts when I return," Melkith contemplated. She took pride in her own punches and kicks. She knew others called them crude and awkward, but wasn't it ultimately all about landing the hits? However, rampaging in front of so many people brought her to a sudden realization. If she was going to punch and kick anyway, wouldn't it be better to do it so perfectly that anyone watching would be amazed? "Enemy reinforcements are coming. They appear like demonic beasts but are not. Please be cautious when dealing with them." Voices resonated from the sun high in the sky like oracles. The voice belonged to the saint, and the priests were immediately relaying the message to all allies upon hearing it. Soon the flying squad spotted the enemy reinforcements. They looked like monsters. They looked slightly similar to demonic beasts but weren't exactly demonic beasts. This subtle difference was almost indescribable. It came as an instinctive feeling. None of the grotesque and ominous monsters were small. Even the smallest of the bunch were larger than an average ogre. Some ran on 2 legs, others on 4, and some crawled like insects. There were even those with differently shaped wings soaring through the sky. "What is that?" muttered Melkith. She had been frantically swatting the fleeing demons but looked shocked when she saw the monsters. These monsters were approaching rapidly and seemed to number over 1,000. "I thought they were enemy reinforcements," Melkith exclaimed in horror. As they advanced, the monsters were crushing and decimating the undead from the rear. It was evident that the monsters lacked the reasoning to distinguish friend from foe. The sudden arrival of these monsters perplexed not only Melkith but also the desperate demons. While they were horrified by the monsters crushing through the undead, they also felt an inexplicable sense of nostalgia. The demons of Revesta did not know about the Nur. However, they could vaguely sense the dark power mixed within these creatures. The Incarnation's minions? But I've never heard of such monsters. The demons felt a familiar power, but it seemed clear that these monsters were not allies. Even if the demons tried to regard them as allies, the monsters seemed unlikely to hesitate in their indiscriminate attacks. Such was the ominous aura they exuded. "Those are the Nur. Why are they here?" Sienna asked in surprise while observing the battlefield from the sky. "They started pouring out from the royal palace," answered Anise. "Did that bastard summon them?" questioned Sienna. The presence of humans in the palace vanished simultaneously. "I'm not sure how he did it, but perhaps he used them as sacrifices for the summoning." Anise expressed her displeasure without hiding her emotions. Sienna's face soured as well to reflect Anise's expression. She clicked her tongue and lifted Frost. The Nur were the true vassals of destruction, the vanguard of the Demon King of Destruction. They were monsters that indiscriminately slaughtered all living beings they encountered. Their numbers were significant, and their mere breaths were ominously unsettling. Sienna was determined to stop the monsters before they reached the allies, and she raised her mana to attack. Just as she was about to release her magic, a deafening noise, like thousands of thunders striking simultaneously, shook the heavens. It was as if the sky itself was crumbling, or rather as if the world was ending. Such was the enormity of the sound. The explosive sound came without warning, and it caused everyone to look up in shock. Most onlookers couldn't comprehend what they were seeing. There was a collision of swirling colors and black flames. As everything merged into one, the world's light flickered for a moment. Some couldn't withstand it and collapsed on the spot. Although there was no physical blast, the emotional storm it spread was overwhelming. Sienna was no exception. She barely managed to steady her trembling form as she stood in the sky. The Demon King of Destruction, she thought in surprise as she felt the Demon King from those colors. The piercing noise had left her ears ringing and her head spinning. "Christina? Anise?" She called out but was greeted with silence. It seemed that their connection was temporarily severed by the shockwave. Sienna continued to gaze at the sky while feeling a sense of inevitable unease. "My God," muttered Sienna. The flickering had stopped, but the sky hadn't returned to normal. A vast, black scar lingered across the heavens, undulating as if it were alive. Sienna understood the significance of what she was seeing. She couldn't fathom what had been done, but Eugene, that madman, had truly left a scar on this world. She immediately sought out Eugene and Mare, who should have been with him. They were nowhere to be found. Neither Eugene nor Mare existed in this world any longer. "Could it be?" muttered Sienna. They weren't dead, which could only mean... Sienna stared intently at the wound in the sky with disbelief. "Come here, you bastard." The sudden curse wasn't what startled the specter. Instead, he was left wondering where they exactly were. The sky. Oh. This place was a pitch-black world of nothingness, just like the palace of incarceration in Babel. It was dark. No light existed. Yet Eugene and the specter stood out starkly against the black backdrop as if they were freshly painted. "Where's Horia?" The specter wondered. Looking down revealed no city in sight. Had the city vanished entirely due to the recent collision? That seemed absurd. Others might, but Hamel or Eugene wouldn't do such a thing. "Where is this?" The specter's question hung unfinished as Eugene charged toward him. Fwish. Despite the darkness, Eugene's flames didn't blend into the background. The single wing of black flames trailed behind him, and he reached the specter in an instant. Eugene had neither the holy sword nor the moonlight sword in his hands. Both swords had temporarily lost their light after unleashing all their power in one go. The specter was in a similar state. He was still surrounded by chaotic flames but could not unleash his dark power as before. There was a brief lull in power for both of them, and they both recognized this fact. "Crazy bastard." The specter cursed, appalled. Eugene was at a clear disadvantage in this situation. With the holy sword and moonlight sword dimmed, the natural course of action was to retreat to recover. No matter how strong Eugene Lionheart was, attacking a demon king without any weapons was akin to suicide. Suicide? Was that really true? The specter had to reconsider when he saw Eugene's clenched fist. The specter knew too well the darkness that silenced Kamash and the Centipede Mountains in a single strike. It was this very technique that had ended the specter in the battlefield of Coachella within the Samar rainforest, where he first encountered Eugene. "I can't win this." He had muttered those words as Hamel's body disintegrated. When he was left with nothing but a pitiful soul, the specter reflected on how he had been defeated. He pondered deeply about the flames. The flames wrapped around Eugene's fist now were much stronger than those he had seen in Samar. To be struck by it would mean more than just pain. The specter realized the truth too late. Suicide? Oh. That man was charging with absolute conviction to kill the specter. Crackle. The specter was sent flying backward. Although he managed to defend himself, he still felt the impact of the strike. The flames around him churned in color, and a crack appeared on the mask he donned. Ugh. The specter twisted his body while swallowing back the surging blood. His dark power had yet to recover. He could not wield a sword, so he had no choice but to mimic Eugene and extend his fist. That proved to be a mistake. The moment he thrust his fist forward, he came to a realization. His memories, experiences, and instincts all judged his reaction as wrong. Had he not already experienced this before? The specter was once again reminded of this. The gap in our skill was overwhelming. In terms of pure output of power, abilities, and magic, the specter could compete with Eugene. But if it came down to a purely physical brawl, the specter could never defeat Eugene. That was an immutable truth. After considering every possible option, the specter desperately extended his hand to escape. But Eugene's hand found its place around the specter's wrist as if it were only natural. The encircling grip was dreadful and relentless. The specter's arm was crushed in an instant. Without hesitation, the specter severed his own arm. The only clear advantage he had at this moment was immortality, similar to that of a demon king. The specter's eyes wavered. He had just realized his mistake a few seconds ago. Even though he lost an arm, it had already regenerated. Continuing like this would yield no different outcome. Yet the specter didn't widen the gap between himself and Eugene. Instead, he closed in on Eugene. Why he did so was none of Eugene's concern. An eclipse formed in each of Eugene's hands. He intended to barrage the specter with rapid strikes. If the fool dared to try and respond in kind, Eugene was confident he could deflect the attacks. Otherwise, he could simply obliterate the specter even if he tried to defend. But the specter's actions were peculiar. Eugene found Eclipse being diverted sideways. The dark world was immediately filled with explosions. Neither Eugene nor the specter were caught in the blast. One went astray, but it posed no problem for Eugene. The other Eclipse was ready in his left hand, and Prominence prepared a makeshift eclipse at his back. Though not as powerful as the ones he conjured directly, the advantage lay in being able to fire rapidly. With Eugene's current power, he could convert all the flame feathers into eclipses and unleash a volley in the blink of an eye. Punch first, then. Divinity was sparked in his mind. Failure. Eugene felt a sensation similar to when he had cut through Molin's axe. His eyes filled with divine energy. It was a revelation distinct from predictions or prophecies. In an instant, countless strategies for successfully executing his planned attack flooded Eugene's mind. He came to a conclusion immediately. All of his strategies were destined to fail. No matter the attack, it wouldn't reach the specter. But even knowing this, Eugene still launched Eclipse. It wasn't out of disbelief in the divine revelation. On the contrary, he trusted it enough to want to verify it firsthand. The sequence of events seemed to slow down for Eugene. Eclipse approached the specter, and its surface bubbled like a sun on the verge of explosion. The specter's hand caught the eclipse, handling it delicately as if it were a fragile glass orb. The touch of his fingers calmed the sun's fury, and soon, the specter's dark power wrapped around Eclipse like a thin sheet as he flung it aside. The result was an explosion. Nothing was caught in it. Feathers dropped from Prominence and clustered together into hundreds of suns. Black spots spread on the surface of the mini-suns, unleashing a barrage of eclipses. The specter's flames boiled in anticipation of the onslaught. The chaotic mix of colors in the flames whirled around the specter's shoulders like a lion's mane. The specter remained motionless, yet the flames it conjured consumed Eugene's. It didn't result in a reversal of Eugene's mana. Instead, it simply burned away. Eugene kept moving. He was well acquainted with this process. It was the same as when he first encountered Vermouth and when they first dueled under the condition of becoming allies. What followed was... Eugene advanced. Flames continued to flare and blows were exchanged. The specter's movements suddenly changed, and it felt as if Eugene was fighting a different person than before. This was different from when the specter merely mimicked magic. Eugene knew this process as well as the specter's fluid movements. The specter was better at deflecting rather than meeting blows head-on. After countless confrontations, Eugene had to become familiar with parrying to keep up with the specter's movements. And that infuriated him even more. It was revolting. Divine energy responded to his vehemence. The divine energy in his eyes pierced through the gaps in his opponent's movements. Without a moment's hesitation, Eugene moved towards that opening. Boom. His fist connected with the specter's chest once. The shock of the penetration caused the specter to stop momentarily. Eugene could have continued his assault and crushed the specter's head. But he chose not to. Instead, he grabbed the mask the specter wore. "I," Eugene said, crushing the mask completely with his hand and continuing, "hate this the most." Eugene glared at the specter's face. There was a possibility that the specter was Vermouth. Perhaps he would find Vermouth's face staring back at him. But he had never actually believed in the possibility. There was no way this was Vermouth. "What the fuck is wrong with your expression?" Eugene questioned. He just wanted to see the face behind the mask. "Why the fuck do you look like you've got some tragic backstory?" His hand, which had shattered the mask, formed a fist again. "Despicable." As he spat the word, he slammed his fist squarely in the specter's face. Chapter 483, Flame 4. The punch shattered something and pushed in even further. This would have been far enough to stop if the opponent had been human. There would have been no need to push any further since a punch like this to the face would undoubtedly be fatal to a human. But Eugene's current opponent was not human. Therefore, Eugene didn't retract his fist. Instead, he pressed on even harder. Crunch. His fist finally smashed through the obstruction completely. Boom. Black flames exploded like fireworks above the specter's neck. Eugene's fist quite literally burst the specter's head open. The headless body teetered for a moment while trying to correct its stance. The specter's head hadn't regenerated yet. Nonetheless, the headless body lunged at Eugene without hesitation. At a glance, the specter's body seemed driven by uncontainable rage. However, the specter had not lost reason or control due to anger. His movements remained precise, fluid, and smooth like water or smoke. Yet upon contact, the gentle flow turned into a fierce storm, threatening to tear or engulf everything in its path. Eugene knew all too well. He could swear on everything he had that this opponent was the one he had fought against the most since Hamel's birth. The person in question was Vermouth. The same was true for Vermouth. Hamel was the one he had fought against the most. It couldn't be otherwise. Just like with Hamel, most of Vermouth's enemies did not survive past their first battle. On the other hand, Hamel and Vermouth had no reason to kill each other, and Hamel often sought duels, leading to countless confrontations between the two. So Eugene was certain. Vermouth didn't have a set of defined techniques, but that unique style of deflecting and countering was unmistakably his. It wasn't only his physical skills either. The specter's techniques were infused with Vermouth's specialty in spatial manipulation. The discord Eugene felt was palpable. Was it because the specter was using spatial magic? No, that much was acceptable to Eugene. But seeing the specter perform Vermouth's maneuvers was infuriating. It felt absolutely disgusting. The specter was born from Hamel's memories. He bore Hamel's face and used Hamel's techniques. And now he was even employing Vermouth's white flame formula and magic, along with Vermouth's unique movements and skills. This son of a... Eugene cursed in irritation. He would have felt less disgusted if the specter had boasted blatantly. If the specter had said something cliched like wanting to kill Eugene to become the real Hamel, Eugene would have felt some sense of relief. He might have felt relief if the specter had been similar to the delusional Amelia. If he had some absurd wish or, like the mosquito Alfiro, was blinded by some stupid loyalty to the Demon King. Or, like Amelia, if he died seeking revenge after failing to accomplish anything as the Demon King. There were countless reasons the specter could have chosen. If he had just picked one and stood by it, Eugene was sure he wouldn't be feeling this vile discomfort. But the bastard didn't pursue any of those reasons. After coming to his senses, the specter met with Molin and invaded the Black Lion Castle before a day had passed. Despite launching an attack, he didn't kill anyone and only spouted nonsense about coming to infuriate everyone before leaving. Then what about his occupation of Horia? The more Eugene thought about it, the angrier he got. "What the fuck do you want?" Eugene shouted. His arms were intertwined with the specter's. If Eugene was caught, his arm would break and he could no longer hear the voices of Christina or Anise. In other words, if he suffered a broken arm here, there was no healing magic to treat it. You even spare a thought for the innocent civilians? You didn't want to drag them into this mess, spat Eugene. Eugene chose to retreat without directly clashing with the specter, but he wasn't running away. He continued to launch eclipse from the feathers of prominence while also cleverly concealing a feather amidst the scattering sparks. He immediately leaped to the feather and positioned himself to the specter's rear. You sealed off the city, formed most of your forces with demonic beasts and demons deemed expendable, and filled in the gaps with the undead, said Eugene. What's wrong with a demon king commanding other demons? The specter retorted. He could no longer hold back when faced with Eugene's continuous taunts. Don't play coy, you bastard, Eugene snapped. The specter's response was utterly unsatisfactory. I asked you why that fucking look. Why do you look like you have a fucking sob story? It's not just your expression though. Everything about you screams it, said Eugene. The specter found no words to counter the barrage of insults. Instead, he twisted his body and swiftly extended a hand toward Eugene. Spatial magic was immediately completed and pressured Eugene from all directions. In response, Eugene's cloak flapped open. Crackle. Bombardments from the thunderbolt and the dragon spear struck the specter. Although the bombardment wasn't nearly as powerful as Eugene's techniques, the well-charged attacks managed to neutralize the space manipulated by the specter to a degree. So what, you didn't want to do this but you had reasons, had no choice? Eugene's mockery didn't cease. He reached into the cloak and pulled out a massive hammer. It was the Annihilation Hammer Jigalath, the weapon used by the Demon King of Carnage. The specter's expression stiffened when he saw the weapon. He had forgotten. Eugene Lionheart didn't only wield the Holy Sword and Moonlight Sword. He also possessed the arsenal of the former Demon Kings. Then spill it. What's your damn story? Eugene roared while swinging the Annihilation Hammer. The specter reflexively layered spaces to form a barrier, only to immediately realize his mistake. The power of the Annihilation Hammer was incredibly straightforward. In fact, it could be said that none among the various weapons of the Demon Kings had a simpler ability than the Annihilation Hammer. It annihilated whatever it hit. What the Annihilation Hammer could smash depended on the strength of its wielder. With Eugene's strength, empty spaces, mere voids, were no different than glass windows in front of the Annihilation Hammer's power. Crack! The layered barrier shattered into pieces. The simple brute force zeroed in on its target. The specter quickly extended both hands and raised his flames in defense. The intertwined colors of the flames blocked the Annihilation Hammer. Who exactly are you? What do you want from me? And that son of a bitch Vermouth, why did he teach you the white flame formula? And Eugene's shouts were interrupted. Do you really think? The specter's face contorted. Do you think I'm staying silent because I don't want to talk? The specter stopped, unable to continue. What could he say? The specter felt suffocated. But it wasn't as if he could simply spill everything. What he had to do, what he wanted to do was speak, shouted Eugene. The veins in his neck bulged. He stowed the Annihilation Hammer back into the cloak. Was it the Demon Spear Luentos next? The specter made an assumption based on the power of the Demon Spear, the Spear Forest. Eugene would summon countless spear blades at spatial coordinates. Whoosh. He was wrong. What emerged from the cloak was the Moonlight Sword. The pale, expanding moonlight formed a crescent, and the specter's eyes widened in disbelief. The Moonlight Sword? Suddenly. Wasn't it unusable? Finish your sentence, you prick. Eugene growled. He had no intention of holding a conversation until now, especially when the specter first unleashed the flames of the white flame formula. However, the specter suddenly spouted nonsense about Eugene not being strong enough. He blabbered on as if he was so desperate to show off his tragic backstory. It pissed him off. But he held back. There was only one thing for the hero and the Demon King to do when they met on the battlefield. They would fight and kill. Questions could be asked before the killing, or so Eugene thought. But this son of a bitch kept acting unbefitting of a Demon King. He continued to flaunt his tragic backstory while keeping his trap shut. Eugene couldn't stand the repulsiveness of it all. Crack! A crescent slash flew towards the specter's face. The specter barely managed to intercept the Moonlight Sword. He had recovered his dark power to a degree, but still receiving Eugene's strikes did not prove easy. It was an issue of the heart. Eugene's words weighed heavily on him, making the Moonlight Sword feel heavier than before. The specter's body felt the same. The sticky, boiling emotions weren't only affecting the specter mentally but also physically. He suddenly felt much heavier than before. Disgusting, the specter recalled. Why was he making this face? Dark emotions bubbled furiously inside of him. It felt like his head was filled with fire and was about to burst from the heat. You don't know shit, the specter shouted with a scowl. It was true. Eugene Lionheart knew nothing. He probably thought he simply needed to kill the Demon King of Incarceration and the Demon King of Destruction. Unfortunately, it wasn't that simple. The specter knew this. He couldn't be certain that he knew everything, but he was sure the Demon King of Incarceration wasn't lying. And what he knew was enough to justify his current choice. Of course I don't know, you dipshit. How could I know if you don't tell me? If I knew, I'd be a god. Eugene shouted. However, he felt slightly guilty. Technically, Eugene was a god. But that was a story from one of his past lives, and strictly speaking, he wasn't a god now, was he? No one had brought up his words as being contradictory, but Eugene convinced himself anyway. That son of a bitch Vermouth, the Demon King of Incarceration, and you You all act like you're holding on to some grand secret that is too precious to share now, promising to reveal it later but not for free. It's all such bullshit. The more Eugene spoke, the angrier he became. It all started with Vermouth. If Vermouth was going to reincarnate him, he could have at least left a letter explaining everything. Why had he left such crucial information in bits and pieces? And most of it wasn't even reliable, leaving Eugene still clueless about Vermouth's whereabouts, let alone his true identity. The Demon King of Incarceration was no better. His antics made Eugene want to beat him to a pulp, not because he was a Demon King, but simply because he was infuriatingly vague. Even a saint who had never uttered a curse in their life would definitely swear if they met the Demon King of Incarceration. It was evident in all of Eugene's encounters with the damned Demon King. The first time they met in the tomb, the Demon King of Incarceration didn't speak directly but hinted at something about a foolish lion, Vermouth's affection, and so on. Every single word he spoke was disgustingly suspicious. And what about after that? He blatantly protected Eugene, even controlling his demons until Eugene was ready. Then at the night march he openly declared he'd wait until Eugene climbed Babel. The worst part had been in the battle against Iris after she had become a Demon King. Who was the one who stopped the Moonlight Sword's rampage? It was the Demon King of Incarceration. Who explained the situation in the Deep Sea City? It had been the Demon King of Incarceration. And after all that son of a bitch says he'll only reveal what I need most after I climb the Demon King's castle. Eugene raged, his anger boiling over. The most infuriating thing in the world was someone who stopped talking midway, someone who didn't finish their words. You too, you bastard. You despicable bastard. Eugene spat without regard. Eugene continued his relentless assault while unleashing a torrent of heartfelt curses. Before long he was once again wielding both the Moonlight Sword and the Holy Sword just like before. Each strike was imbued with his fury. Meanwhile, other attacks were being orchestrated from within his cloak. If the Spectre attempted to erect a defensive barrier, the Annihilation Hammer was used to shatter it. If he tried to make use of the space around him, the Demon Spear was used to restrict his movements. Thus, he was restrained in space as Eugene attacked him with Eclipse. The Spectre was struck squarely several times. He could not dodge the attacks or block them. His body remained heavy, his head throbbed with pain, and the boiling emotions in his heart seemed bottomless. That's right, the Spectre finally screamed with bloodshot eyes. The surging emotions had overcome his reason. It was Vermouth who gave me power. This wasn't a conversation he planned to have before the fight was over. It was he who bestowed upon me the dark power of destruction when I was meant to die. He who made me into the incarnation of destruction. All of it was that bastard Vermouth, shouted the Spectre. He charged at Eugene, each outcry seemingly dissipating the heavy lump of emotions that had weighed down his chest. That bastard. Even as I fought you, he continued to empower me. He taught me how to use the white flame formula and the magic no powers. Even how he fought in the past. The Spectre continued his ravings. The Spectre was mostly filled with frustration and anger. He had been filled with hatred and a desire for vengeance when he was deceived by his fake memories. But once he realized his true identity, he could no longer harbor hatred or a desire for revenge. He was simply frustrated, sorrowful, and angry. Why him? Why was he made aware of the truth? If he had remained ignorant, he wouldn't have had to ponder such matters. I initially just wanted to kill you. I thought maybe I could replace you if I did. But it was impossible, the Spectre admitted. The core of the Spectre's identity was Hamel, who would never engage in such actions. The Spectre tried to find stronger assurance, so he met with Molan and watched Sienna from a distance. Afterward, he found himself able to completely let go of that desire. I can never be you. It's not about being fake or real. I am just me, and I can't be you, said the Spectre. Crack. A tumultuous array of colored flames burst from the Spectre's demonic sword. With the Spectre beginning to wield the demonic sword, Eugene could no longer afford to swing the Holy Sword and the Moonlight Sword separately. Although he did not merge the light as before, the two swords formed a single line in their strikes. I knew you wanted a war in Nahama, so I did as you wished. To give you a more legitimate cause, I even invaded the Black Lion Castle. The Spectre's voice grew harsher as he continued. I planned to act out the war. I had nothing to gain from this war. I would just go through the motions then put you in the spotlight. And throw Amelia Merwin, that woman, at your feet. Clang. The colliding flames mixed together. I just wanted to fight you. I planned to die after a decent fight. I thought I would be content with that, explained the specter. Why do you have to die fighting me? Eugene interrupted. He was the first to stop his sword. The abrupt cessation of the attack surprised the specter, causing him to halt its sword as well. I've roughly got the gist of your situation, and if you're not going to act like a total ass, I'm willing to accept you as an ally, said Eugene with a tilt of his head. The specter's mouth hung open in shock after hearing his words. Of course you can't just get off scot-free. Apologize to Molan and then kneel and beg at Black Lion Castle. Hey, but why didn't you go see Sienna? Questioned Eugene. I went to see her secretly. The specter admitted in a quiet voice. Secretly? You sneaky bastard. You were spying on Sienna. Eugene yelled again furiously. He raised the holy sword and the moonlight sword once more, and the specter instinctively flinched and stepped back. I didn't see anything weird, he said hastily. Then I'll forgive you. For now, let's continue talking, Eugene said, furrowing his brows and fixing his gaze on the specter. Do we really have to fight each other? I consider myself quite rational, and after hearing your story, it seems like I don't necessarily have to kill you. That's for you to decide, the specter responded. He calmed his stirred emotions and smiled. My decision hasn't changed. I am determined to kill you no matter what. You said earlier you thought of dying in a fair fight, said Eugene. That was before I met the Demon King of Incarceration, responded the specter. All right, then let's talk about that now, Eugene said with a nod. Why are you so intent on killing me? That is. Don't tell me you're going to say something like, if you defeat me I'll tell you, Eugene interrupted. The specter's eyes wavered. What if I accidentally kill you before getting the chance to hear your story because I couldn't control my strength? Eugene asked. Why do you assume you'll definitely win? The specter questioned with furrowed brows. His expression mirrored Eugene's. What an attitude. Eugene clicked his tongue and shook his head, saying, let's say for the sake of argument that you could defeat me. Imagine you succeed in killing me. But what if you also lose control of your power in the process? There's no need to waste words on someone who's going to die anyway, the specter countered. That's where you and I are different, bastard. I'm willing to have this conversation even though I plan to kill you. Isn't that right? Eugene cursed once more. The specter had no comeback. Don't be so stubborn pretending to have a deep story. Just spit it out. We'll talk and then decide what to do afterward, Eugene continued. What do you mean to do afterward? Questioned the specter. Eugene looked at the specter as if he was an idiot to ask the most obvious question. Fight. The specter looked confused. What's with that look? Whether I decide to kill you or not will depend on what I hear, but that's a completely different issue from the fight, said Eugene. His anger had yet to fully dissipate. Chapter 484. Flame 5. What the hell is this guy talking about? The specter thought uncertainly. Honestly, Eugene's actions were incomprehensible. Anyone else would think so as well. Just moments ago, Eugene and the specter had been trying to kill each other. It wasn't just for show either. Both of them had been giving it their all. The attacks they unleashed on each other were so sharp and precise that even a graze could have led to a fatal blow. They fought to kill each other, and they had been motivated by sufficient emotions as well. Had it been sincere? Even if it wasn't necessarily true for the specter, Eugene must have been serious. The specter recalled Eugene's intense murderous intent. There was no reason for Eugene not to harbor such feelings toward the specter. The specter was sure that Eugene must have resolved to kill him from the moment he reached the royal palace or even before he descended into the city. And yet Eugene now showed no intent to kill. Despite his frustrated and irritated expression, he did not charge at the specter like before. The holy sword and the moonlight sword, which had been wielded with such deadly intent just minutes earlier, no longer glowed with their usual light. It was difficult for the specter to comprehend such a change in Eugene's emotions, and yet... With a long sigh, the specter ultimately conceded and came to an acceptance. It was absurd, incomprehensible even. Some might consider Eugene's behavior abrupt and emotional, but that wasn't quite it. Eugene, or rather Hamel, had made the most rational decision under the current circumstances. But Eugene's decision wasn't one made out of sympathy for the specter. Did he feel any pity for the specter's plight? Perhaps he could find a drop or two of sympathy if he tried hard, but frankly he didn't feel any sympathy for the specter at the moment. As long as the specter sought to kill Eugene, he remained nothing more than an enemy. Eugene was not so overly sentimental as to feel compassion for his foe. Ultimately, Eugene hesitated to kill the specter because of Vermouth. If the specter's existence was orchestrated by Vermouth, it would be wise for him to sheath his sword and delve into the matter before deciding whether to kill the specter. Perhaps he could reflect more on the specter's existence afterward and perhaps even feel a slight compassion. "That's so like you," commented the specter with a bitter smile. He could definitely follow Eugene's train of thought. The specter then sheathed his demonic sword. During this brief lull, Eugene finally took notice of his surroundings. "It reminds me of where Raizakia was trapped," Eugene noticed. They were in a rift in space. Eugene had a rough idea of how they arrived here. It was possible that they were flung into this place due to the massive impact created by their swords colliding in the sky. With that thought, he felt a slight worry creep into his heart. "Is everything okay outside? I hope we didn't cause a massive disaster and got everyone involved." As Eugene pondered such a thought, Anis's voice suddenly echoed in his mind. "Don't worry, there's no problem." Startled, Eugene took a step back. What? How can you speak to me?" he asked. "It's because the light holds you dear," Christina responded. "We became connected just a little while ago. Have you not noticed?" commented Anis. "A connection?" Eugene glanced at the holy sword in his hand. His connection with the saints seemed to return once the holy sword's light was reignited. "It's not as clear as before," Eugene observed. "It's probably to be expected given the special nature of the space you're in. How does it feel?" "It reminds me of the gap where Raizakia was and also has a feeling akin to the other side of Lehanjar. We must have gotten tangled up with the spatial magic that the bastard was using," answered Eugene with a grimace. Still, it was fortunate that he wasn't completely cut off from the outside world. Even if they were in a different space, as long as they were conscious of each other and connected, he could make his way out. "So, is everything really okay outside?" asked Eugene. "There remains a deep, dark scar in the middle of the sky," responded Anis. Many were startled and fell to their knees at the loud noise, but no one was swept away by the aftermath and died, Christina added. "Hamel, that's not what's important right now. The army of the Nur is quite fierce," commented Anis. "Lady Sienna is holding them off, but..." Christina trailed off. "Is it that difficult?" Eugene asked, not quite fully understanding. Molan had defeated the Nur for over 100 years. Eugene had seen Molan kill the Nur several times during his stay in Lehanjar, and it was never particularly difficult. The most troublesome aspects of the Nur were the ominous dark power they wreaked and the poison they emitted upon death. "If it's just a few, maybe. But the Nur here number over 1,000, answered Anis. "I'm not sure if they might be resonating among themselves, but our holy power can't do more than barely fend them off. Lady Sienna is reducing their numbers with her magic, but..." Christina chimed in. "Tisich." Eugene clicked his tongue in annoyance. Indeed. If they had no use besides rampaging mindlessly, they would not have been able to lead the vanguard as the true vassals of destruction. Thinking back, even the divine army in the Age of Myth struggled quite a bit against the armies of the Nur without Agaroth personally stepping in. "Just hold on for now," Eugene told the saints. "Are you planning to talk to him? Haven't you been listening?" Eugene retorted. "We didn't intend to eavesdrop. It just happened to be audible." "It's fine. You all need to know this story anyway," responded Eugene before looking up. A little distance ahead, the specter was staring at him with a dark glimmer in his eyes. "Are you done thinking?" Eugene asked. "I was waiting for your conversation to end," responded the specter. "Ah, okay, our conversation is over, so now you can start talking," said Eugene. He took a casual stance and nodded perfunctorily. "Why do you have to kill me? Before leaving the Black Lion Castle and coming to Horia, I met the Demon King of Incarceration," the specter started. It wasn't to the specter's liking that Eugene looked so half-hearted when he was about to tell important matters. But arguing over such trivial things with that man would prove futile and never-ending, so the specter continued his story without pausing. "After becoming the incarnation of destruction and realizing I was a fake, I went to the Demon King of Incarceration alone. I climbed Babel and..." What, you went to swear loyalty to him? Eugene mocked with a jerk of his chin. The specter had intended to continue speaking calmly, but after hearing Eugene's mocking comment he became furious. His personality was ultimately derived from Hamel's memories, so he was bound to share some of Hamel's fiery temper. Don't talk nonsense. Why would I swear loyalty to that bastard? Retorted the specter. Those monsters you brought, they were all under that bastard's control, weren't they? Who do you take me for, an idiot? Said Eugene. Why do you keep picking fights when I'm trying to tell you about the situation? The specter accused. Picking fights? Did you just say picking fights? Hey, you bastard, shall we go over who started the whole thing from the beginning? Eugene retorted while pointing accusingly. The specter felt an intense urge to swing his demonic sword and chop off Eugene's accusing finger right there and then, but he managed to clench his trembling fist in restraint. Eugene felt a sense of satisfaction and lowered his finger as he observed the specter's simmering anger subside. So, what did you do when you climbed up Babel? Eugene prompted, casually steering the conversation back to the beginning. It wasn't exactly smooth, but Eugene didn't consider it a problem for him to worry about. I challenged the demon king of incarceration, answered the specter. Was he strong? Eugene immediately asked. It wasn't even a fight. All my powers were futile in front of the demon king of incarceration, the specter answered, then he paused for a moment, lost in thought. When he had challenged the demon king of incarceration, the specter couldn't use Vermouth's magic or the white flame formula as he did now. He wasn't as competent with the dark power of destruction as he was now. Back then, the specter only relied on his massive pool of dark power and used techniques inferior to Eugene's. If we fought now, I might not be defeated as easily, but I'm not confident. The demon king of incarceration is that overwhelming, the specter admitted. It was a humiliating truth, but the specter had no choice but to acknowledge it. Eugene had never directly fought the demon king of incarceration. Therefore, he desperately needed the specter's assessment now. Eugene judged the specter to be strong. He was infinitely stronger than Iris when she became the demon king of fury and likely stronger than the demon kings from 300 years ago. Yet the specter was utterly defeated by the demon king of incarceration. I see, said Eugene. The specter judged that he would still suffer defeat in a hypothetical battle against the demon king of incarceration in his current state. However, it didn't matter. It was the specter who was defeated, not Eugene. Someday Eugene would climb Babel and challenge the demon king of incarceration. By then he would undoubtedly be far stronger than now and fully prepared for the challenge. I actually wanted to die at the hands of the demon king of incarceration, but he didn't kill me. Instead, he spouted some nonsense about finding the answer to my existence by myself and kicked me out of Babel, the specter admitted with a sigh. Shaking his head, he continued, I sought that answer. I traveled the world, visited libraries and crammed my head with events from the past 300 years. I went to Lahanjar to see Molin and to Aroth to see Sienna. Why didn't you see Anise? Eugene's abrupt question made the specter furrow his brows and glare at him. Should I have paid tribute to Anise's statue in Ura's square? Questioned the specter. Christina is Anise, said Eugene. The specter was struck with the information without any warning, and his eyes widened in shock. He was so startled that he couldn't continue speaking and stepped back hesitantly. Christina Rogerus is. Anise, what nonsense are you? Could it be? Was Anise also reincarnated? The specter inquired. Not reincarnated. Her soul remained in this world and possessed Christina, Eugene explained. It was hard to understand even after Eugene's explanation, but it wasn't necessarily important to understand its logic. What mattered was that Anise existed in this era and was helping Eugene for the sake of the world. I see, the specter said. He felt a complex swirl of emotions. He thought of Hamel, who died alone in Babel, and his comrades who had stood before him. He thought not of betrayal, hatred, or revenge but the true emotions Hamel and his comrades harbored 300 years ago. The specter could never truly possess those emotions, and he did not desire to covet those memories. But upon realizing that Hamel had been reincarnated, that Molin and Sienna were still alive, and even Anise, whom he thought was dead, still existed, he felt a slight tremor in his heart. He felt it all the more after realizing the truth. Finally, the specter said, being killed by the demon king of incarceration. The conversation with Eugene stirred a slight tremor in the specter's heart. If they could understand each other to some extent and their ultimate goals aligned, couldn't they perhaps enjoy peace for the time allowed? Could he not assist Eugene's journey within his possible means? Couldn't he, even in his current state, still contribute in some way? Do you know what it means to be killed by him? The specter asked. He dismissed the various desires born from the slight tremor in his heart. In the end, they were all petty ambitions. The specter gazed at Eugene with calm eyes. Death, I suppose, Eugene answered after a moment. That gaze made Eugene uncomfortable. Yet it was still a relief that he could hold a real conversation with the specter. If it were the demon king of incarceration, he would have likely responded with cryptic answers before disappearing. No, that's wrong, the specter shook his head. Being killed by the demon king of incarceration means your very existence gets trapped by his power. The specter continued, you have memories of your past 2 lives, so you must also know that this world was once destroyed by the demon king of destruction. Eugene knew. The specter was referring to the age of myth when Agaroth and numerous deities lived. Even as the demon king of destruction annihilated everything, the demon king of incarceration survived. He experienced the destruction of the previous era. He wasn't erased and reborn, nor awakened to a past life like yourself. The demon king of incarceration simply survived, explained the specter. Eugene just listened to the specter's tale quietly. He showed me directly, the specter said. The light touch of chains had resulted in a flood of information for the specter. He had seen some of the demon king of incarceration's memories. It had come as a shock far greater than being pierced and shattered. He had allowed his head to explode because he didn't want to understand. The demon king of incarceration's memories had been horrifying and void beyond comprehension. It wasn't just once either. I can't be sure of the exact number, but the demon king of incarceration has witnessed the world's destruction several times. Do you understand what I am saying? The demon king of destruction has already destroyed this world multiple times, the specter continued. The world would be filled with countless corpses and desolate cities. Waves would surge from somewhere. After the sea engulfed everything, leaving no land to tread upon, the land buried deep under the sea would rise to create continents. Life would begin anew. Mountains would rise and rivers would form. Trees would grow, forming forests. Grass would spread, creating fields. Somewhere sand would accumulate to form deserts. And the demon king of incarceration always survived, said the specter. In the newly born world, the land where the demon king's castle was first built became the Devildom. The demon king of incarceration moves on to the next era with the souls he commands. If you are contracted with him or killed by him, once your existence is trapped, you can never reincarnate, the specter explained. Eugene's face inevitably stiffened at those words. Humans offered their souls as payment in the contracts they formed with demons and demon kings. In other words, the majority of Helmuth's citizens were already deprived of reincarnation. Helmuth was an empire of souls deprived of the cycle of rebirth. But if this reincarnation wasn't limited to this era but extended to the next, and if souls captured by the demon king of incarceration were not freed even after the world was destroyed by the demon king of destruction, then this era is special, the specter said with a long sigh. The demon king of incarceration also knows that this era is unique. Why do you think it's special? Because destruction has been postponed, Eugene replied. You are dodging the answer, the specter said with a bitter smile. He pointed at Eugene. What makes this era special is your presence, a reincarnated individual. Eugene Lionheart. In your past life you were Hamel and before that a god of war. Eugene remained silent, his expression sour. After a moment of silence he said, I'm aware the demon king of incarceration has witnessed several eras. He is present in the vague memories I have of my previous lives. So why do you seek my death? Eugene's train of thought abruptly came to a stop as he was struck by a sudden realization. Eugene stopped speaking and glared at the specter, prompting him to continue. Just as the demon king of incarceration is focused on your uniqueness, so is Vermouth, the specter began. I believe Vermouth wanted to end everything this time. Vermouth sought out Hamel, the reincarnation of Agaroth, and made him an ally. They roamed the Devildom together and defeated demon kings. If you had been with us, there would have been no need to fight the demon king of incarceration upon reaching the summit of the demon king's castle. My primary condition was reaching that summit. If I could meet the Demon King of Incarceration's true form there, that would have been enough. It was a failure. Vermouth kept his deepest wishes hidden from his comrades. Eugene, as Hamel, never managed to guess Vermouth's situation. All Hamel thought about was not wanting to hold back his comrades and not wanting a disgraceful survival. He desired a death befitting the deeds he had done. Vermouth failed to achieve his goal 300 years ago. But it wasn't a complete failure. On the other hand, strategically, the failure back then might have been for the best, said the Spectre. Eugene understood the significance behind the Spectre's words. In the 300 years leading to his reincarnation, Sienna and Molen had grown stronger, and Anissa's soul had passed on to Christina. And the reincarnated Eugene was incomparably stronger than when he was Hamel. He had even awakened Agarotha's memories. You must not die by the Demon King of Incarceration's hand now, the Spectre declared. That's why I intend to kill you. If you can't surpass even me, if you die by my hand, you'll never defeat the Demon King of Incarceration. After accepting the truth shown by the Demon King of Incarceration, this was the only conclusion the Spectre came to. Vermouth placed his hope in Hamel, not in himself. Hamel of 300 years ago didn't know this, nor did the world. At that time the hero, the hope, was the great Vermouth. But that was no longer the case in this era. We can't let the hope that is you be bound by the Demon King of Incarceration. If it's impossible in this era, if you're not confident in defeating the Demon King of Incarceration, and if you can't even beat me. The Spectre glared at Eugene, declaring, it's best to end this world here.